The transport ship descended through the orange clouds of Velar Prime, carrying 300 new recruits to the most prestigious military academy in the known galaxy. Among them sat a girl who did not speak. Her name was Kira Voss, and she was 17 years old. She had dark hair cut short, eyes the color of storm clouds, and a small device attached to her throat that blinked with a faint blue light. Kira watched through the window as the massive structure of the Galactic Defense Academy appeared below. The academy was built into the side of a mountain, with towers reaching toward the sky and training fields stretching for kilometers in every direction. Ships of all sizes moved around it like insects around a hive. This place trained the warriors who protected humanity across 1,000 worlds. And, somehow, against all odds, Kara had earned a place here. The boy next to her leaned over to look out the window. His name was Marcus Chan, and he had been talking since they left Earth 3 days ago. He came from a wealthy family on the Pacific colonies and seemed to know everyone important. "Can you believe we made it?" Marcus said with excitement in his voice. "My father said only 1 in 10,000 applicants gets accepted. We are the best of the best." Kara nodded but said nothing. She could not say anything even if she wanted to. The scar on her throat told a story that she kept to herself. When she was 12 years old, raiders had attacked her colony on the Outer Rim. They killed her parents and destroyed her home. In the chaos, a piece of shrapnel had torn through her vocal cords. The doctors saved her life but could not save her voice. The device on her throat was supposed to help. It was called a vocoder, and it could translate her thoughts into spoken words. But the technology was old and unreliable. Most of the time, it produced only static and broken sounds. Kara had learned to communicate in other ways. She could write, she could use hand signals, and she could express more with her eyes than most people could with words. The ship landed with a soft thump, and the recruits began to gather their belongings. Kira picked up her small bag, which contained everything she owned in the universe. She followed the crowd toward the exit, trying to ignore the nervous energy that filled her stomach. Outside, the air was thin and cold. Velar Prime was a harsh world, chosen specifically because it would challenge the recruits from their first moment. A group of officers stood waiting, their uniforms perfect and their faces stern. The one in front was a tall woman with silver hair and cybernetic eyes that glowed faintly red. "Welcome to the academy," she announced in a voice that carried across the landing area without any amplification. "I am Commander Zara Thorne. For the next 4 years, I will be your senior instructor. Most of you will not make it to graduation. Some of you will wash out in the first week. A few of you might die during training exercises. This is the reality of what you have chosen." The recruits stood in shocked silence. This was not the welcoming speech they had expected. Commander Thorne continued walking down the line, examining each recruit with those unsettling red eyes. "The galaxy is at war. It has been at war for 50 years, ever since the Keth Empire decided that humans were too weak to deserve our own territory. Every year, they push deeper into our space. Every year, we lose more worlds. You are here because you want to fight back. But wanting is not enough. You must become weapons." She stopped in front of a large boy with muscles that strained against his uniform. "Name?" "Victor Crane, Commander," he answered proudly. "My father is Admiral Crane of the 3rd Fleet." "I do not care who your father is," Commander Thorne said coldly. "Here, you are nothing but potential. And potential means nothing until it is proven." She moved on, stopping occasionally to question other recruits. Kira tried to make herself small, hoping the commander would pass her by. But those red eyes found her, and Commander Thorne stopped directly in front of her. "Name?" Kira opened her mouth, but only a whisper of static came from her vocoder. She reached for the small tablet in her pocket, where she had prepared a message explaining her condition. "I asked for your name, recruit," Commander Thorne said, her voice growing harder. "When an officer asks you a question, you answer immediately." Kira held up her tablet, but before the commander could read it, Victor Crane laughed from somewhere behind her. "She cannot talk," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. I saw her on the ship. She is broken. A wave of whispers spread through the crowd. Kira felt her face grow hot with shame and anger. She stood straighter and looked directly into Commander Thorne's cybernetic eyes, refusing to show weakness. The commander read the message on Kira's tablet, then looked at her for a long moment. Kira Voss, she read aloud. Colony survivor from Outpost 7. Your entrance exam scores were the highest in physical combat and tactical thinking. You scored in the bottom 10% for communication exercises. She paused. How do you expect to lead soldiers if you cannot speak to them? Kira typed quickly on her tablet, I will find a way. Commander Thorne's expression did not change, but something flickered in those mechanical eyes. We shall see. She turned away and continued her inspection. That night, the recruits were assigned to their barracks. The academy used a dormitory system, with 8 recruits sharing each room. Kira found herself in room 47 with 7 other girls. Some of them seemed friendly. Others looked at her with pity or disgust. One of the friendly ones was a girl named Sarah Kim, who came from Mars. She had bright eyes and a quick smile, and she did not seem bothered by Kira's silence. Ignore what that big idiot said on the landing field, Sarah told her as they unpacked their bags. Victor Crane is famous for being a bully. His family has money and power, so he thinks he can treat people however he wants. But, here, we all start at 0. Kira typed a response on her tablet, thank you. But, he was not wrong. I am at a disadvantage. Sarah shook her head. Different is not the same as disadvantaged. My grandmother always said that obstacles are just opportunities that have not been recognized yet. Kira appreciated the kindness, but she knew the truth. The academy was designed for people who could communicate normally. Every exercise, every class, every simulation would require her to speak, to shout orders, to coordinate with teammates. She would have to work 10 times harder than everyone else just to keep up. The first week was orientation, and it was brutal. The recruits woke before sunrise for physical training that pushed their bodies to the breaking point. They ran up mountains, swam through freezing rivers, and fought each other in hand-to-hand combat sessions. After the physical training came the classroom work, where they learned about military history, starship systems, alien species, and battle tactics. Kira excelled in the physical training. Years of surviving on the outer rim had made her tough and resourceful. She could run longer than most of the other recruits, fight with a determination that surprised her opponents, and endure pain without showing weakness. In the combat simulations, she moved with a grace that made the instructors take notice. But the classroom work was harder. Whenever an instructor asked a question, Kira had to type her answer on her tablet. By the time she finished typing, other students had already spoken. In group discussions, her contributions were often ignored or talked over. Some students were patient with her, but others grew frustrated. Just spit it out already, one boy muttered during a strategy session. Some of us actually want to participate. Kira felt the familiar burn of shame in her chest. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him that she was smarter and tougher than he would ever be. But screaming was impossible. She could only sit in silence while her words remained trapped inside her. Victor Crane was the worst. He had gathered a small group of followers who shared his cruelty. They called Kira the Mute and made sure she heard their whispered insults whenever they passed her in the hallways. Victor seemed to take personal pleasure in her struggles, as if her weakness made him feel stronger. During a team exercise in the second week, Kira was assigned to Victor's squad. The task was to navigate a simulated battlefield and capture an enemy position. Each team member had a role to play, and success required careful coordination. Victor assigned Kira to the most dangerous position, Point Scout. She would be the first one into enemy territory, the one most likely to be killed in the simulation. It was a punishment, and everyone knew it. But Kira did not complain. She accepted her position and prepared for the exercise. When the simulation began, she moved through the artificial forest with silent efficiency. Her lack of voice became an advantage here. She could not accidentally reveal her position with a careless word. She communicated with hand signals, directing her team around enemy patrols with precise gestures. The first contact with the enemy came at a small ridge. Kira spotted 3 simulated soldiers guarding a path. She signaled for her team to wait, then circled around alone. Moving through the undergrowth like a shadow, she approached the guards from behind. In 3 quick movements, she eliminated all of them before they could raise an alarm. Her team watched in amazement. Even Victor seemed surprised by her skill. They pushed forward, and Kira continued to lead from the front. She spotted traps that others would have missed, found paths through difficult terrain, and took down enemy soldiers with quiet efficiency. When they reached the objective, it was Kira who developed the final plan of attack. She drew the plan in the dirt with a stick, showing each team member where to go and what to do. There were no words needed. Her strategy was clear and brilliant. The attack succeeded. Victor's squad captured the objective faster than any other team that day. The instructors were impressed, and Commander Thorne herself came to observe the final moments of the exercise. But, when the after-action review began, Victor took all the credit. "My strategy was to use aggressive flanking maneuvers," he explained to the instructors. "I assigned team members to positions based on their abilities and coordinated the final assault." Kira stood in silence, her hands clenched at her sides. She typed a message on her tablet, but no one asked for her input. Sarah, who was on a different team, watched from the sidelines with anger in her eyes. That night, Sarah found Kira sitting alone outside the barracks, staring up at the unfamiliar stars. "That was wrong," Sarah said, sitting down beside her. "Everyone saw what you did today. Victor is a liar and a thief." Kira typed on her tablet, "It does not matter. Words are power here. He has words. I do not." "Then, find another kind of power," Sarah replied. "You already have it. I saw it today. When you move through a battlefield, it is like watching poetry. You do not need words when your actions speak that loudly." Kira thought about this for a long time after Sarah left. Actions speaking louder than words. It was an old saying, but, here at the academy, words seemed to be everything. Reports, orders, speeches, arguments. Everything required communication. But, what if she could find a way to communicate that went beyond words? The answer came during a combat training session. The recruits were practicing with simulation weapons, fighting one-on-one matches while instructors evaluated their skills. Kira waited for her turn, watching the other fighters carefully. Most of them fought with strength and aggression, trying to overpower their opponents through sheer force. They shouted as they attacked, announcing their movements with every grunt and yell. It was effective but predictable. When Kira's turn came, her opponent was a tall boy named Derek who had spent his childhood in low-gravity stations. He was fast and flexible, and he had already defeated 3 opponents that day. They faced each other in the training ring. Derek smiled confidently. "No hard feelings," he said. "I will try to make this quick." Kira said nothing. She simply watched him, studying his body language, his stance, the tiny movements that revealed his intentions. The instructors signaled for the match to begin. Derek lunged forward with a quick attack. But Kira had already seen it coming. She sidestepped smoothly and redirected his momentum, sending him stumbling past her. Before he could recover, she struck him twice in quick succession. The match was over in seconds. Derek lay on the ground, looking confused about what had just happened. The instructor, a weathered veteran named Sergeant Chen, nodded slowly. "Again," he ordered. They fought 5 more times. Kira won every match. She did not make a sound, did not waste energy on unnecessary movements. She simply watched, predicted, and struck with perfect efficiency. After the final match, Sergeant Chen approached her. He was a small man with deep scars on his face and eyes that had seen too many battles. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" he asked. Kira typed on her tablet, Outpost 7. Survival. The sergeant understood. The Outer Rim colonies were dangerous places where people learned to fight or they did not survive at all. "You fight like a ghost," he said. "Silent, patient, deadly. Have you considered specializing in reconnaissance operations?" Kara had not considered anything beyond just trying to survive the academy. But, now, a new possibility opened in her mind. Reconnaissance specialists worked alone or in small teams. They operated behind enemy lines, gathering intelligence and eliminating high-value targets. Communication was important, but so was the ability to move in complete silence. "I would like to learn more," she typed. Sergeant Chen smiled, which was a rare thing for him. "Come to Training Room 7 tomorrow at 0500. We will see if you have what it takes." The advanced reconnaissance training was even harder than regular academy work. Kara woke 2 hours before the other recruits to attend special sessions with Sergeant Chen. He taught her things that were not in the regular curriculum: how to move through any terrain without leaving traces, how to read body language and predict behavior, how to disable enemies without making a sound. He also taught her new ways to communicate. Military hand signals were basic and limited, but Sergeant Chen knew a more complex system developed by Special Operations Forces. It was almost a full language, capable of expressing complicated ideas and orders through subtle movements of the hands and fingers. "Words are just one tool," Sergeant Chen explained. "A good soldier has many tools. A great soldier invents new ones when the old ones fail." Kira absorbed everything like water into dry earth. For the first time since arriving at the academy, she felt like she belonged somewhere. Her silence was not a weakness in reconnaissance training. It was an asset. Weeks turned into months. Kira's regular academy scores remained average because she still struggled in classes that required verbal participation. But her combat scores climbed higher and higher. She was becoming known as one of the deadliest fighters in her year, though she still received less attention than louder, more visible recruits like Victor. The dynamic changed during the Winter Combat Games, a massive simulation that pitted different recruit teams against each other in a week-long exercise. The game took place in a harsh mountain environment, and teams had to capture territory, defend positions, and eliminate opposing forces. Performance in the Winter Games heavily influenced final rankings and career assignments. Kara was assigned to a team led by a girl named Elena Cross, a natural leader with a talent for strategy. Elena had noticed Kara's skills in training and specifically requested her for the team. "I need someone who can operate independently," Elena explained at their first team meeting. "Someone who can gather intelligence and strike without warning. Based on your training records, you are the best choice." Victor, who was leading an opposing team, overheard this conversation. "You are putting the mute in a critical position," he laughed. "Good luck with that. When she fails to warn you about an ambush because she cannot shout, do not say I did not warn you." Elena ignored him. "Boss, I am giving you full operational freedom. Scout ahead, identify enemy positions, and engage targets of opportunity. Use your judgment. I trust you." Those last 3 words meant more to Kara than Elena could have known. Someone in authority was trusting her abilities, looking past her disability to see the soldier underneath. The Winter Games began on a freezing morning with light snow falling from gray skies. Teams spread out across the mountain territory, establishing bases and planning their campaigns. Kara slipped away from her team's main force and disappeared into the wilderness. For the next 3 days, she became a ghost in the mountains. She located the positions of 4 different enemy teams, mapped their patrol routes, and identified their key officers. She sent this information back to Elena using a secure communication device, providing her team with intelligence that no other group possessed. On the 4th day, she struck. Victor's team had established a strong position at a mountain pass, blocking one of the main routes through the exercise area. They had guards posted, defensive barriers erected, and seemed confident that no one could approach without being detected. Kira proved them wrong. She approached at night, during a snowstorm that reduced visibility to almost nothing. She moved so slowly and carefully that she was practically invisible, even to the guards with enhanced vision equipment. One by one, she eliminated the guards. A soft touch to a pressure point here, a perfectly aimed stun dart there. By the time Victor realized something was wrong, half his team was already out of the exercise. He burst out of his command tent, weapon raised, looking for an enemy to fight. But the snow had already covered Kara's tracks, and she was long gone. The news of Victor's defeat spread quickly through the exercise area. An entire team had been dismantled by a single scout, and no one had seen the attacker's face. Elena's team used the opportunity to advance through the now unguarded pass, gaining a massive territorial advantage. By the end of the week, Elena's team had won the Winter Games by the largest margin in Academy history. During the awards ceremony, Commander Thorne herself presented the team with their medals. Outstanding performance, the commander announced. Strategic excellence, tactical flexibility, and individual bravery. I want to particularly acknowledge the reconnaissance work of recruit Kara Voss, whose intelligence gathering and direct action operations were crucial to her team's victory. It was the first time Kara's name had been spoken positively in front of the entire academy. She stood at attention, trying to keep her face neutral, but inside she felt a warmth that she had not experienced in years. For this moment, she was not the silent girl, the broken recruit, the mute. She was a soldier who had proven her worth through actions that spoke louder than any words. Victor stood in the losing team's section, his face red with humiliation. When the ceremony ended, he approached Kara with anger burning in his eyes. "You got lucky," he said quietly, so that no officers could hear. "Sneaking around in the dark like a coward. That is not real fighting. That is not what warriors do." Kara looked at him calmly. She typed a message on her tablet and held it up for him to read. "Winners do not make excuses." Victor's face twisted with rage. For a moment, Kara thought he might actually attack her. But they were surrounded by other recruits and instructors, so he had no choice but to walk away, muttering threats under his breath. Sarah appeared at Kara's side, grinning widely. "That was amazing," she said. "Did you see his face? I thought he was going to explode." Kara allowed herself a small smile. It was a good moment, perhaps the best since she had arrived at the academy. But she knew that it was only the beginning. Victor would not forget this humiliation, and he would find ways to strike back. More importantly, there were still 3 more years of training ahead. 3 more years of struggling against a system designed for people who could speak. 3 more years of proving herself through actions when words failed her. But, for the first time, Kara believed that she could make it. She had found her path, and she would walk it to the end, no matter what obstacles stood in her way. The winter gave way to spring, and Kara continued her dual training regimen. Regular classes during the day, advanced reconnaissance work in the early mornings and late nights. Her body grew stronger, her skills sharper, and her reputation slowly spread through the academy. Other recruits began to seek her out, asking for help with combat training or wanting to hear the story of how she had defeated Victor's team. Kara could not tell the story in words, but Sarah was happy to do it for her, adding dramatic embellishments that made the tale even more legendary. "She moved through the storm like a phantom," Sarah would say to eager listeners. Guards fell asleep at their posts and never woke up. By the time Victor knew what was happening, it was already over. Kara did not mind the exaggeration. Stories had power, and even though she could not speak them herself, she could become a story that others wanted to tell. But the academy was about to face a threat that would test all of them, one that would push Kara to discover abilities she never knew she possessed. It started with rumors. Strange reports from the outer training zones. Equipment malfunctions that could not be explained. Sensor ghosts that appeared and disappeared at random. The instructors seemed concerned, though they tried to hide it from the recruits. Then came the emergency drill. Except it was not a drill. The alarm sounded at midnight, pulling recruits from their beds with its harsh scream. Red lights flashed through the corridors as everyone rushed to their assigned emergency stations. Kara grabbed her equipment and moved with the crowd, but something felt wrong. The air had a strange smell, like burning metal and ozone. Commander Thorne's voice came over the speakers. "This is not a drill. We have detected an unauthorized entry into Academy space. All recruits report to defensive positions. This is not a drill. Kira's heart raced as the reality of the situation hit her. Someone was attacking the Academy. But who would be foolish or powerful enough to assault the most heavily defended military installation in human space? The answer came when she reached the observation deck and looked out at the night sky. Ships were descending through the atmosphere, their designs angular and alien. She recognized them from her tactical training lessons. The Keth had come. The Keth ships descended like dark birds of prey through the night sky of Velar Prime. There were dozens of them, ranging from small assault craft to larger troop carriers. The Academy's defense systems activated automatically, firing streams of energy into the sky that lit the mountain like daylight. Some Keth ships exploded in brilliant flashes, but others made it through, crashing down in the training fields and surrounding forests. Kara watched the chaos unfold with a strange calmness. Part of her had been preparing for a moment like this ever since she survived the attack on Outpost 7. While other recruits screamed and panicked, she was already planning. Sergeant Chen appeared at her side, his face grim but composed. "They are targeting the communication towers first," he said, pointing to the distant flashes where Keth ground forces were engaging Academy defenders. "Standard invasion tactics. Cut off communication, then divide and conquer." Kara nodded, understanding immediately. Without communication, the Academy would become isolated islands of resistance that the Keth could destroy one by one. They needed to maintain some form of contact between defensive positions. "I have a mission for you," Sergeant Chen continued. "The main communication array was destroyed in the first wave, but there is a backup system in the eastern bunker complex. If we can activate it, we can coordinate our defense. But the bunker is behind enemy lines now." Kara typed quickly on her tablet, "I will go." "I know you will," the sergeant replied. "Take anyone you can find who can keep up with you. This is real combat, not a simulation. People will die tonight. Are you prepared for that?" Kara looked out at the burning landscape, at the strange alien craft scattered across the mountain, at the distant sounds of weapon fire and screaming. She thought about her parents, about the colony she had lost, about all the years of silence and struggle that had led her to this moment. She typed, "I have been prepared for a long time." Sergeant Chen handed her a real weapon, not a training simulator. It was a compact rifle designed for close-quarters combat, light enough to carry during long movements but powerful enough to stop a Keth soldier. Kara felt its weight in her hands and understood that everything had changed. "Good luck, Voss," the sergeant said. "The Academy is counting on you." Kara moved through the chaos of the Academy grounds, searching for teammates who could accompany her on the mission. She found Sarah near the medical station, helping to carry wounded recruits to safety. "Kira!" Sarah called out when she saw her approach. "What is happening?" "The instructors are saying the Keth are attacking, but that is impossible. They have never penetrated this deep into our territory." Kira typed quickly, "It is real. I have a mission. Need help. Dangerous." Sarah did not hesitate. "I am with you. What do we need to do?" They gathered 2 more recruits, Derek, the fast fighter Kara had defeated in training, and a quiet girl named Lynn who specialized in technical systems. It was not a large team, but Kara knew that speed and stealth would matter more than numbers for this mission. She explained the plan using hand signals and quick messages on her tablet. They would move through the eastern forest, avoiding the main roads where Keth forces were concentrated. Their objective was the backup communication bunker, approximately 3 kilometers away. Once there, Lynn would activate the system while the others provided protection. 3 kilometers through enemy-held territory, Derek said quietly. "With real Keth soldiers who will actually try to kill us. This is insane. Do you have a better idea?" Sarah asked. Derek shook his head. "No. I am just making sure everyone understands what we are walking into." Kira led them out through a maintenance tunnel that exited near the edge of the Academy grounds. The night was filled with the sounds of battle, explosions, weapon fire, shouting in both human languages and the harsh clicking speech of the Keth. Fires burned across the landscape, casting dancing shadows through the smoke-filled air. They moved in single file, Kara at the front, her senses stretched to their limits. Every shadow could hide an enemy. Every sound could be a warning of approaching death. She used all the training Sergeant Chen had given her, reading the environment, predicting danger before it appeared. The first Keth patrol crossed their path about 500 meters from the academy. Kara saw them before anyone else did, for tall figures in dark armor, their helmeted heads sweeping back and forth as they searched for targets. The Keth were physically imposing, standing over 2 meters tall with elongated limbs and joints that bent in directions that seemed wrong to human eyes. Kara held up her hand, signaling her team to stop and take cover. They pressed themselves against the cold ground, barely breathing as the patrol passed within 30 meters of their position. One of the Keth paused and seemed to look directly at them. Kara's finger tightened on her weapon's trigger. But, after a long moment, the Keth soldier turned away and continued with its patrol. When they were gone, Sarah exhaled shakily. "I thought it saw us," she whispered. Kara signed, "Lucky. Stay quiet. Move slow." They continued through the forest, avoiding 2 more patrols and one Keth landing zone where troops were unloading from a transport ship. The night grew colder, and a light rain began to fall, which actually helped them by masking their sounds and limiting visibility. After an hour of careful movement, they reached the ridge overlooking the eastern bunker complex. What they saw made Kara's heart sink. The bunker was surrounded by Keth forces. At least 20 soldiers had established a perimeter, and they seemed to be preparing to breach the facility. The Keth commanders had apparently recognized the importance of the backup communication system and sent forces to capture or destroy it. "There are too many," Derek said. "We cannot fight our way through that." Kara studied the enemy positions, her mind racing through possible strategies. A direct attack would be suicide. Even if they managed to break through the perimeter, they would be overwhelmed before Lin could activate the communication array. But there was another option. The Keth were concentrated around the main entrance, which was built into the side of a cliff. According to the academy maps that Kara had memorized during her training, there was a ventilation system that connected to the surface about 200 meters from the main facility. If they could find the external access point. She drew a quick diagram in the mud, showing her team the plan. Sarah would create a distraction, drawing some of the Keth away from the bunker. Meanwhile, Kara, Derek, and Lin would find the ventilation access and enter the facility from above. It was risky, but it was their only chance. Sarah agreed without complaint, though they all knew she would be in the most danger. "Give me 10 minutes to get into position," she said. "When you hear the explosions, that is your signal." She slipped away into the darkness before anyone could say goodbye. Kara watched her go, feeling a strange mixture of pride and fear. Sarah was brave, perhaps too brave. But they needed her courage tonight. The 10 minutes passed like hours. Kara led Derek and Lin around the ridge, searching for the ventilation access point. They found it hidden beneath a cluster of rocks, a metal grate barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. Lin worked quickly to bypass the security lock while Kara kept watch. The first explosion echoed through the night, followed by 2 more in quick succession. Sarah had done her job. Kara could hear the Keth soldiers shouting to each other, their harsh voices rising in alarm. A large group broke away from the bunker perimeter and moved toward the source of the explosions. "Now," Kara signed. The grate came open, and they dropped into the ventilation shaft one by one. The shaft was narrow, dark, and smelled of metal and recycled air. They crawled forward in complete darkness, guided only by the mental map Kara had constructed from the academy blueprints. At several points, the shaft narrowed so much that she had to squeeze her shoulders together just to pass through. After what felt like an eternity, they reached a junction that opened into the main bunker facility. Through a ventilation grate, Kara could see the communication center, rows of equipment, screens displaying static, and 2 Keth soldiers standing guard. She signaled for Derek to prepare for combat. They would have only seconds to eliminate the guards before an alarm could be raised. Every movement had to be perfect. Kara kicked the grate open and dropped into the room in a single fluid motion. Her rifle came up automatically, trained on the nearest Keth soldier. She fired twice before her feet touched the ground. The soldier collapsed without making a sound. Derek came through next, engaging the second guard. But this one was faster than expected. It dodged his first shot and swung a massive arm that caught Derek across the chest, sending him flying into the equipment. His weapon clattered away across the floor. The Keth soldier raised its own weapon, aiming at Derek's fallen form. Kara threw herself forward, tackling the alien around its waist. It was like hitting a wall. The Keth was impossibly strong, and it threw her off with a casual movement that sent her crashing into the wall. Pain exploded through her body, but she had faced worse. She rolled to her feet and came up with her knife, the one Sergeant Chen had given her during training. The Keth soldier turned toward her, its dark helmet tilting as if studying this small human who dared to challenge it. They faced each other for a frozen moment. Then, the Keth attacked with frightening speed, its long arms sweeping toward her in a pattern designed to overwhelm any defense. But Kara had trained for this. She read its movements, predicted its strikes, and slipped through the gaps in its assault like water through fingers. Her knife found the gap in its armor, just below the helmet where the neck connected to the body. The Keth soldier fell heavily, its clicking speech dying in its throat. Kara stood over the body, breathing hard, her knife dripping with alien blood. She had just killed something. A real creature, not a simulation. She waited for horror or guilt to wash over her, but all she felt was a grim satisfaction. These were the same creatures who had destroyed her home, who had taken her parents, who had taken her voice. She owed them nothing but death. Derek groaned and pushed himself up from the floor. "I am okay," he said, though one arm hung at an odd angle. "Shoulder is dislocated. I can still fight." Lynn had already moved to the communication equipment, her fingers flying over the controls. "Give me 5 minutes," she said. "I can get this system online if nothing else goes wrong." 5 minutes was a long time to hold a position. Kara checked the room's entrances, counting 2 doors and the ventilation shaft they had used. She positioned Derek at one door, taking the other herself. They would have to hold until Lynn finished her work. The first wave of Keth soldiers arrived 2 minutes later. They burst through the door Kara was guarding, 3 of them moving in perfect coordination. She dropped the first one with a headshot before they could react, then threw herself behind cover as their return fire shredded the air where she had been standing. The next minutes blurred together in a chaos of violence and survival. Kara moved constantly, using the equipment for cover, taking shots when she could, retreating when she had to. Her ammunition ran low, then ran out completely. She switched to her knife, engaging in close combat that pushed her skills to their absolute limit. One Keth soldier managed to grab her arm, its grip crushing. She felt bones grinding against each other as it lifted her off the ground. Instead of struggling, she went limp, making herself dead weight. The soldier loosened its grip slightly in surprise, and that was all she needed. Her free hand drove her knife into the joint of its elbow, severing tendons. The arm went limp, releasing her, and she finished the soldier with a strike to the throat. "It is done," Lynn shouted from across the room. "The system is online. I am broadcasting on all frequencies." Relief flooded through Kara, followed immediately by new fear. They had completed their mission, but they were still trapped in a bunker surrounded by enemies. More Keth soldiers were pouring into the facility, their weapons ready. But then, something changed. Through the bunker's external sensors, Kara saw movement in the sky. Bright streaks of light descending from above, too fast to be Keth ships. Human reinforcements. The communication array had worked. The Academy had called for help, and help had arrived. The Keth commanders must have seen the same thing, because their troops began to withdraw. Not in panic, but in organized fashion, falling back to their ships with military precision. The attack on the Academy was over. Humanity had held. Kira slumped against the wall, exhaustion finally catching up with her. Her body was covered in bruises, cuts, and alien blood. One of her ribs was definitely cracked, and her left arm throbbed where the Keth soldier had grabbed her. But she was alive. They were all alive. Lin came to sit beside her. "You saved us," she said quietly. "I have never seen anyone fight like that. You took on multiple Keth soldiers in close combat and won. That should be impossible." Kira shrugged, too tired to type a response. Fighting was what she knew. It was the one thing that did not require words. Derek joined them, his arm now in a makeshift sling. "When we get back, they are going to give you a medal. Maybe several medals. What you did tonight was legendary." The rescue teams found them an hour later, guided by the communication signal Lin had established. Sergeant Chen was with them, his face showing relief when he saw Kira standing among the survivors. "I knew you could do it," he said. "Report to the medical station. You have earned some rest." But rest would have to wait. As they emerged from the bunker, they found chaos. Fires still burned across the academy grounds. Bodies lay covered with sheets, waiting to be identified and claimed. Medical teams rushed everywhere, treating the wounded and counting the dead. Kira searched the crowds for Sarah, growing more worried with each passing moment. Her friend had created the distraction that made their mission possible. She should have been able to escape once the Keth forces moved away from the bunker. She found Sarah in the medical station, lying on a bed with bandages wrapped around her torso and one leg. Her face was pale but her eyes were open, and she smiled weakly when she saw Kira approach. "You made it," Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper. "I knew you would." "The mission was a success?" Kira nodded, tears forming in her eyes despite her best efforts to control them. She typed on her tablet, "You saved us." "You saved everyone." "I just made some noise and ran really fast," Sarah replied. "You did the hard part." She closed her eyes, exhausted. "They said I will be okay. Just need some time to heal. Do not worry about me." Kira sat beside her friend's bed for a long time, holding her hand, watching her sleep. The weight of the night pressed down on her, the fighting, the killing, the fear. She had survived, but survival came with its own costs. The sun rose over a changed academy. The Keth attack had lasted only one night, but it had transformed everything. 23 people had died, including 4 instructors and 19 recruits. Dozens more were injured. Buildings had been destroyed. The sense of safety that the academy had always represented was shattered. Commander Thorne called an assembly of all surviving personnel. She stood on a platform overlooking the damaged parade ground, her cybernetic eyes glowing red in the morning light. "Last night, we were tested," she began. "The Keth believed they could destroy us before we could become threats to their empire. They were wrong. Because of the bravery and sacrifice of everyone here, we held our position until reinforcements arrived. The attack has been repelled, and the enemy fleet has withdrawn from our space." She paused, letting her words sink in. The recruits stood in uneven rows, many of them bandaged, all of them exhausted. "I want to recognize several individuals whose actions were particularly noteworthy." The commander began reading a list of names, each one followed by a description of what they had done during the attack. Kira was not surprised when her name came near the end. Recruit Kira Voss led a 4-person team through enemy-held territory to activate our backup communication system. Her actions directly enabled the rescue forces to locate and assist our position. She personally engaged and defeated multiple Keth soldiers in close combat, demonstrating extraordinary skill and courage. Commander Thorne looked directly at Kira, and something like respect flickered in those mechanical eyes. "Recruit Voss will receive the Academy Star, our highest honor for recruits. She has proven that a warrior's worth is not measured by their voice, but by their actions." The recruits around Kira began to clap, and the applause spread until the entire assembly was cheering. Even Victor, standing at the back with a bandage on his head, could not avoid joining in without looking petty. For a moment, Kira felt overwhelmed. This was more recognition than she had ever received, more acceptance than she had dared to hope for. But, even as she stood in the warm glow of appreciation, she knew that this was just the beginning. The Keth had attacked once. They would attack again. And, next time, they would be better prepared. The following weeks brought major changes to the academy. Security was increased dramatically, with new defensive systems being installed and training protocols being modified to better prepare recruits for real combat. The Keth attack had proven that the war was not a distant concept but an immediate threat that could reach even the most protected locations. Kira's fame spread throughout the academy and beyond. News of her actions during the attack reached the wider military community, and she began receiving communications from officers who wanted to recruit her for their units after graduation. Her story seemed to capture something that people needed: hope that even those with disadvantages could become heroes. But fame brought complications. Other recruits looked at her differently now, some with admiration, others with jealousy. Victor's hostility grew colder and more calculated, though he was careful to hide it from instructors. He knew that directly attacking Kara would reflect badly on him, so he found subtler ways to undermine her. During a tactical planning exercise, Victor deliberately gave Kira incorrect information about enemy positions, causing her team to lose the simulation. In weapons training, he accidentally bumped into her during target practice, throwing off her aim. Small things, difficult to prove, but designed to chip away at her reputation and confidence. Kira noticed the pattern but chose not to respond. She had more important things to focus on. Sergeant Chen had recommended her for the Advanced Commando program, an elite training track that only the top recruits could access. If she was accepted, she would spend her remaining years at the academy learning the most dangerous and valuable skills in the military. The selection process for the commando program was brutal. Candidates had to complete a week-long evaluation that tested every aspect of their abilities. Physical endurance, combat skills, psychological stability, tactical thinking, and leadership potential were all examined under the most demanding conditions. Kira approached the evaluation with the same quiet determination that had carried her through everything else. She completed obstacle courses while sleep-deprived. She fought multiple opponents in hand-to-hand combat. She navigated hostile terrain with limited equipment. She solved complex tactical problems under time pressure. The hardest part was the leadership evaluation. Candidates were given teams to command through simulated missions, and their ability to coordinate and communicate with others was carefully assessed. This was where Kira had always struggled, and she knew that her evaluators would be watching closely to see how she handled it. Her team for the leadership evaluation was a mix of recruits she had never worked with before. They watched her skeptically as she approached, clearly wondering how a silent girl was supposed to command them. Kira had prepared for this moment. She had spent months developing new ways to communicate, working with Lin to create a system of signals and visual cues that could convey complex orders quickly. She had also learned to use her tablet more efficiently, typing rapid messages that her team could read on small displays attached to their uniforms. The mission was a hostage rescue scenario. Her team had to infiltrate an enemy compound, locate and secure civilian prisoners, and extract them safely while avoiding detection. Timing was critical. One wrong move could result in the hostages being killed. Kira gathered her team and laid out the plan using a combination of hand signals, drawn diagrams, and typed instructions. At first, the team seemed confused and frustrated by the unusual communication style. But, as the briefing continued, they began to adapt, paying closer attention to her gestures and reading her messages more quickly. "This is different," one team member admitted. "But, it actually forces us to pay attention. In normal briefings, half of what the commander says goes in one ear and out the other." The mission began. Kira led her team through the compound with the same silent efficiency she had shown during the Winter Games. Her orders came as hand signals and quick taps on shoulders, guiding each member to their position without a single spoken word. They located the hostages in a central building guarded by simulated enemies. Kira divided her team into two groups, one to distract the guards, the other to extract the prisoners. She would personally handle the most dangerous part, neutralizing the guards who were closest to the hostages. The operation unfolded smoothly. Kira's team members responded to her signals with growing confidence, anticipating her orders and moving in perfect coordination. When complications arose, she adapted quickly, changing plans with fluid gestures that her team somehow understood. In the end, they completed the mission with one of the best times and lowest casualty rates in program history. The evaluators were impressed, not just by the results but by the innovative communication methods Kira had developed. "You have turned your weakness into a strength," the lead evaluator told her after the exercise. "Your team had to focus completely on you to receive orders. That forced them to be more attentive and disciplined than teams with verbal commanders. This is the kind of creative problem-solving we look for in commando candidates." Kara was accepted into the Advanced Commando program. The announcement was made during another assembly, and this time Victor could not hide his anger. He had also applied for the program and had been rejected. "This is political," he muttered to his friends, loud enough for nearby recruits to hear. "They are promoting her because of what happened during the Keth attack. She is a symbol, not a real soldier." Kara heard the comments but did not react. Victor's opinion did not matter. What mattered was the training that lay ahead, the skills she would learn, the soldier she would become. The commando program was everything she had hoped for and more. The instructors were veterans of dozens of campaigns, scarred survivors who had seen things that would break ordinary people. They taught her to operate in extreme environments, to withstand torture, to kill with efficiency and without hesitation. She learned specialized combat techniques designed for soldiers who operated alone or in small teams behind enemy lines. She studied alien biology, identifying weak points in Keth physiology that could be exploited in combat. She practiced with weapons that most soldiers never even saw, tools of assassination and sabotage that could change the course of battles. Her fellow commando candidates became like family. There were only 12 of them, and they trained together, suffered together, and supported each other through the hardest moments. Among them were some of the most talented fighters in the academy, but Kara held her own. In fact, she consistently ranked in the top 3 across all evaluations. One of her closest companions in the program was a tall boy named James Walker, who came from a long line of military officers. James had volunteered for the commando program against his family's wishes. They wanted him to become a fleet commander like his father and grandfather. He wanted to fight on the ground, where the war was most immediate and brutal. "My family thinks I am wasting my potential," James told Kira during a rare moment of rest. "They say commanding a starship is more prestigious than crawling through enemy territory. But I have seen what happens to ground troops when their support fails. They die because officers in comfortable chairs make bad decisions. I want to be on the ground, making good decisions that keep soldiers alive." Kira typed, "That sounds like the right reason to be here." James smiled. "You know what I like about you, Voss? You never waste words. Every message you send actually means something. Half the people here talk constantly without saying anything important." Their friendship deepened as the training continued. James was one of the few people who never seemed frustrated by Kira's silence. He learned her hand signals, read her expressions, and somehow always seemed to understand what she was thinking even before she typed it. Sarah recovered from her injuries and returned to regular training, though she was no longer in the same track as Kira. They remained close friends, meeting whenever their schedules allowed to share stories and support each other. Sarah was happy for Kira's success but also a little sad that they were growing apart. "You are going to be famous," Sarah said one evening. "The silent warrior who defeated the Keth. They will tell stories about you for generations." Kara typed, "I do not want fame. I want to protect people." "You will do both," Sarah replied. "Whether you want to or not." The years at the academy passed more quickly than Kara had expected. The first year had been a struggle for survival. The second year brought the Keth attack and her rise to recognition. The third year immersed her in the commando program. And now, the fourth and final year was approaching its end. Graduation loomed ahead, the moment when recruits would become soldiers and receive their assignments. Kira had already received several offers from elite units who wanted her skills, but she had not yet made a decision. The future felt uncertain, full of possibilities but also dangers. The final evaluation for the commando program was a solo mission. Each candidate would be dropped into hostile territory on a distant moon and given a week to complete a series of objectives. Communication with the academy would be limited. Survival would depend entirely on individual skill and determination. Kira prepared meticulously, checking her equipment multiple times, reviewing maps and intelligence reports, planning for every contingency she could imagine. Sergeant Shan, who had become something like a mentor to her over the years, came to see her before she departed. "You have grown more than any recruit I have ever trained," he told her. "When you arrived here, you were angry and afraid and alone. Now you are one of the deadliest soldiers in this academy. But, more importantly, you have learned to connect with others, to lead without words, to inspire through action. That is rare, Voss. Do not ever forget what you have become." Kira typed, "Thank you for everything." The old sergeant nodded, his scarred face showing rare emotion. "Go. Complete your mission. And come back safely." The transport dropped her on the dark moon at night, in a region of rocky canyons and sparse vegetation. The air was thin and cold, requiring her to use a breathing mask when exerting herself. Local wildlife was minimal but potentially dangerous. And, somewhere in this wilderness, her objectives waited. The first 3 days passed without major incident. Kira located and completed her initial objectives, gathering intelligence on a simulated enemy base, sabotaging equipment, leaving markers for theoretical follow-up forces. She moved through the alien landscape like a shadow, leaving no trace of her passage. On the 4th day, everything changed. She was approaching her final objective when she detected movement nearby. At first, she assumed it was local wildlife, but the patterns were wrong. Something was tracking her, using sophisticated techniques that indicated intelligence. Kira found a defensive position and waited, her weapon ready. The tracker appeared at the edge of her vision, a humanoid figure in dark clothing, moving with military precision. Not academy personnel. Someone else entirely. The figure approached her position slowly, hands raised to show they were unarmed. When they came close enough to see clearly, Kira recognized the face. It was Victor Crane. He had changed since she last saw him. His expression was harder, colder, and he wore civilian clothing instead of an academy uniform. But the hatred in his eyes was exactly the same. "Surprised to see me?" he asked, his voice carrying across the quiet landscape. "You should not be. I have been planning this meeting for a long time." Kira kept her weapon trained on him, her mind racing through possibilities. Victor had washed out of the academy a year ago, after his psychological evaluation revealed dangerous instability. He had been quietly removed before he could cause harm to other recruits. Or so everyone had thought. "The Keth Empire is very interested in human soldiers who fail out of academies," Victor continued, still approaching slowly. "They offer money, power, revenge against those who wronged us. All we have to do is serve them. Help them understand humanity's weaknesses." Kira's finger tightened on the trigger. Victor was a traitor, working with the enemy. Everything she had suspected about his character was true, but worse than she had imagined. "You ruined me, Voss," as Victor said, his voice rising with old anger. "Before you came along, I was the one who was going to be a hero. My family, my name, my destiny. You took it all away. A silent, broken girl who should have been nothing. And now I am going to take everything away from you." He raised his hand, and Kira saw the signal device clutched in his fingers. Behind her, in the darkness of the canyon, she heard movement. Many figures, approaching from multiple directions. She had walked into a trap. And she was completely alone. Kira assessed the situation in a fraction of a second. Victor stood before her, his signal device raised, triumph burning in his eyes. Behind her, approaching through the canyon, at least a dozen figures moved with the distinctive gait of Keth soldiers. She was surrounded, outgunned, and far from any help. The Academy would not send rescue forces until her evaluation period ended in 3 days. But Kara had been in desperate situations before. She had survived the destruction of her colony, the brutal training of the Academy, and the Keth attack that had tested everyone's limits. She would survive this too. Her first move caught Victor by surprise. Instead of retreating from the approaching Keth, she lunged forward, directly at him. He stumbled backward, reaching for a weapon, but Kara was faster. She grabbed his arm, twisted it, and used his own momentum to throw him into the path of the nearest Keth soldier. The alien collided with Victor, both of them falling in a tangle of limbs. Kara did not wait to see them untangle. She ran toward the canyon wall, where an overhang created deep shadows that would hide her movements. The Keth opened fire, energy bolts scorching the ground around her feet. One shot grazed her shoulder, burning through her suit and skin, but she kept running. Pain was temporary. Death was permanent. She reached the shadows and immediately began climbing. The canyon wall was rough and uneven, providing handholds that she could use to pull herself upward. The Keth were too large and heavy for this kind of climbing. They would have to find another way up, buying her precious time. Victor's voice echoed from below, filled with rage, "Find her. She cannot escape. The Empire is paying a fortune for a live commando candidate, and she is worth more than all the others combined." So that was his plan. Not just revenge, but profit. Victor had sold her location to the Keth, probably along with information about the Academy's defenses and training methods. He was not just a traitor to his class, but to all of humanity. Kara reached the top of the canyon and paused to catch her breath. Blood seeped from her shoulder wound, staining her suit dark. She needed to treat the injury, but there was no time. The Keth would be finding paths up to her position soon. She pulled out her tactical tablet, hoping to send a distress signal. But the display showed only static. Victor must have brought jamming equipment, blocking all communications in the area. She was truly alone. The next hours became a deadly game of cat and mouse across the harsh landscape of the moon. Kara used every skill she had learned to stay ahead of her pursuers. She laid false trails that led them in circles. She found hiding spots where her small size was an advantage. She set traps using materials from her survival kit, injuring 2 Keth soldiers badly enough that they had to stop pursuing. But the enemy had numbers and resources that she lacked. Every time she thought she had lost them, they found her trail again. Her shoulder wound grew worse, the pain spreading down her arm and making it difficult to hold her weapon steadily. Exhaustion crept into her muscles, slowing her movements. By dawn of the 5th day, she had been driven into a narrow gorge with high walls on both sides. There was only one exit, and the Keth had blocked it. Victor stood at the front of their formation, his face twisted with cruel satisfaction. "It is over, Voss," he called out. "You have nowhere left to run. Surrender now, and I will make sure they treat you well. Fight, and I cannot guarantee your safety." Kara looked at the situation with clear eyes. She counted 12 Keth soldiers, plus Victor. Her ammunition was almost gone. Her body was pushed to its limits. By any logical analysis, she should surrender and hope for rescue during transport. But logic had never been the only thing driving Kara. She had her pride, her determination, her refusal to let someone like Victor win. And she had something else, something that had sustained her through all the darkness of her life, the memory of everyone who had ever believed in her. Her parents, who had given their lives protecting her during the colony attack. Sergeant Chen, who had seen her potential when others saw only weakness. Sarah, who had stood by her side through every challenge. James, who understood her without needing words. Even Commander Thorne, who had acknowledged her worth in front of the entire academy. She would not dishonor their faith in her by surrendering to traitors and aliens. Kara checked her remaining equipment. 2 energy cells for her rifle, 1 knife, a few medical supplies, and a single flash grenade. It was not much, but it would have to be enough. She typed a final message on her tablet, even though no one would receive it through the jamming. I will not go quietly. Then, she stepped out from behind her cover and walked toward the enemy line. Victor watched her approach with confusion. What are you doing? Drop your weapon and get on your knees. Kara kept walking, her eyes fixed on him, her expression calm and cold. She was counting steps, calculating distances, planning the sequence of moves that would give her the best chance of victory. 10 meters from the enemy line, she stopped. Victor was directly ahead of her, flanked by Keth soldiers who kept their weapons trained on her chest. This is your last chance, Victor said. I do not want to damage the merchandise, but I will if you force me to. Kara raised her left hand slowly, as if preparing to drop her weapon. Victor smiled, thinking he had one. Then, her right hand moved in a blur, throwing the flash grenade into the center of the enemy formation. The grenade exploded with blinding light and deafening sound. Keth soldiers stumbled and grabbed at their helmeted heads, temporarily disoriented. Victor screamed and covered his eyes, having been too confident to wear protective gear. Kara was already moving. She had closed her eyes before the explosion and memorized the positions of every enemy. Now she fired her rifle with deadly precision, dropping 3 Keth soldiers before any of them could recover. She charged into the chaos, switching to her knife as the close quarters made her rifle useless. A Keth soldier swung at her with a massive arm, but she ducked under the blow and drove her knife into its knee joint, bringing it crashing down. Another lunged for her, and she rolled beneath it, slashing at the vulnerable point behind its armor as she passed. The gorge became a whirlwind of violence. Kara moved through the enemy like water through rocks, always flowing toward the gaps, never staying still long enough to be caught. Her body screamed with pain from her injuries, but she pushed through it, letting years of training take control. 6 Keth soldiers fell before the others managed to coordinate their defense. They formed a protective circle, weapons pointed outward, covering each other's blind spots. It was a smart tactic against a single opponent. But Kara had anticipated this. She grabbed a fallen Keth weapon and fired at the canyon wall above them. Rocks broke loose from the impact, raining down on the soldiers and breaking their formation. In the confusion, she charged again. 2 more Keth fell to her blade. Another took a shot that grazed its helmet and sent it reeling. The remaining 3 finally managed to catch her, one grabbing her arm while another slammed her against the gorge wall. Pain exploded through her body as she hit the rock. Her knife fell from numb fingers. The Keth soldier holding her arm squeezed, and she felt bones grinding together. But, even in this moment, Kara refused to stop fighting. She kicked out at the soldier's leg joint, the same weak point she had learned about in anatomy training. The alien stumbled, loosening its grip just enough for her to wrench her arm free. She grabbed a rock from the ground and brought it down on the nearest Keth's head with all her remaining strength. The helmet cracked, and the soldier collapsed. The second one came at her, but she was ready, dodging its strike and countering with a blow to its throat that left it gasping. The last Keth soldier raised its weapon, aiming directly at her chest. There was no way to dodge at this range. This was the end. A shot rang out across the gorge, and the Keth soldier fell with a hole burned through its back. Kara looked up in disbelief. Standing at the top of the gorge, silhouetted against the rising sun, was James Walker. Behind him were more figures in academy combat gear. Took us forever to find you through that jamming, James called down, already moving to descend into the gorge. But you left enough destruction in your wake that we could track you by the bodies. More soldiers appeared along the gorge rim, some of them taking positions to secure the area while others began the climb down. Kara recognized faces from the commando program, fellow candidates who had somehow learned about her danger and come to help. But there was still unfinished business. Kara turned to find Victor, who had recovered from the flash grenade and was trying to escape through a narrow crack in the canyon wall. She moved to intercept him, her battered body protesting every step. Victor saw her coming and pulled out a small energy pistol, the kind that could be hidden in civilian clothing. "Stay back," he warned, his voice cracking with fear. "I will kill you. I mean it." Kara kept walking toward him. Her expression showed no fear, no hesitation. Victor had taken everything from her once, and she had rebuilt her life from the ashes. He had tried to take everything again, and he had failed. There was nothing he could do to her that she had not already survived. "You are insane," Victor said, backing up until his shoulders hit the canyon wall. "You should be dead. Any normal person would be dead after what I put you through. What are you?" Kara stopped directly in front of him, close enough to reach out and touch. She looked into his eyes, and, for the first time in their entire history together, she saw something other than cruelty and arrogance. She saw terror. She typed a message on her damaged tablet and held it up for him to read. "I am the voice of everyone you have ever wronged." Then, she moved, too fast for him to react. She disarmed him with a strike to his wrist, caught the falling pistol, and brought the butt of the weapon across his jaw with enough force to knock him unconscious. Victor crumpled to the ground, defeated not by words but by action, exactly as it should have been. James reached her side a moment later, his face showing concern as he took in her injuries. "You need medical attention immediately. How are you even standing?" Kara typed, "Too stubborn to fall." Despite the situation, James laughed. "That is the truest thing I have ever read." He turned to the other soldiers. "Get a stretcher down here. Secure the prisoner and check for any other hostiles in the area." The rescue operation moved quickly and efficiently. Kara finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of her exhaustion and pain, leaning on James as medics rushed to assess her wounds. They gave her injections for pain and infection, sealed her shoulder wound with emergency foam, and prepared to transport her to a medical facility. Before they could lift her onto the stretcher, she grabbed James's arm. She typed slowly, her fingers struggling with the tablet. "How did you know?" "Sergeant Chen," James replied. "When your regular check-in signals stopped, he knew something was wrong. He sent us to investigate. We had to fight through Keth patrols to get here. Victor had betrayed the entire region to the enemy, not just your location." Kira absorbed this information. Victor's treachery had been even worse than she thought. He had been selling secrets to the Keth for who knew how long, putting countless lives at risk. "The Academy is handling it," James continued. "Military intelligence has been tracking unusual Keth activity in this sector for months. Your kidnapping was supposed to be their big prize, but they did not count on you being impossible to capture." Kira felt a wave of gratitude for Sergeant Chen, for James, for all the people who had cared enough to come looking for her. She had spent so much of her life feeling alone, but she realized now that she had built a family during her years at the Academy. Not a family of blood, but something just as strong. The trip back to the Academy took several hours. Kara drifted in and out of consciousness, her body finally surrendering to the need for rest. When she woke, she was in a medical bed surrounded by worried faces. Sarah was there, holding her hand. James stood nearby with several other commando candidates. Sergeant Chen sat in the corner, his weathered face showing more emotion than Kara had ever seen. "Welcome back," Sarah said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Do not ever scare me like that again." Kira managed a small smile. She typed, "No promises." The room filled with relieved laughter. One by one, her friends came forward to express their relief and joy at her survival. Kara felt overwhelmed by the outpouring of affection, but also deeply grateful for it. Commander Thorne arrived later that day, her cybernetic eyes scanning the medical displays before settling on Kara's face. "You have caused quite a stir, Recruit Voss. The intelligence you gathered about Keth operations in this sector will save countless lives. And the capture of Victor Crane has exposed a network of human collaborators that we have been hunting for years." Kira had not considered the broader implications of what had happened. She had simply been trying to survive. But, apparently, her actions had accomplished much more than personal survival. "Your solo evaluation cannot be considered complete under the circumstances," Commander Thorne continued. "However, based on your performance under extreme conditions, the Commando program instructors have unanimously agreed to pass you. You will graduate with full honors." The words washed over Kira like warm sunlight. She had done it. Despite everything, despite the silence that had followed her like a shadow, despite the enemies who had tried to destroy her, she had proven herself worthy of the Academy's highest program. The graduation ceremony took place 3 weeks later, after Kira's wounds had healed enough for her to stand without assistance. The entire Academy assembled in the Grand Hall, a space reserved for the most important occasions. Commander Thorne presided over the ceremony, reading the names of graduates and their assignments. Each name was met with applause, each assignment with respectful acknowledgement. When Kira's turn came, the commander paused and looked out at the assembly. Kira Voss came to this academy with no voice and few expectations from those who saw only her limitations. She leaves as one of the finest soldiers this institution has ever produced. The commander turned to face Kira directly. Recruit Voss, you have been assigned to Special Operations Group 7, the most elite commando unit in the human military. Your commanding officer specifically requested you based on your demonstrated abilities. This was unexpected. Assignment requests usually went the other direction, with graduates requesting certain units. For a commanding officer to specifically ask for a particular graduate was extremely rare. However, Commander Thorne continued, before you leave for your assignment, there is one more matter to address. During your time here, you have accomplished things that few believed possible. You have led teams to victory without speaking a word. You have defeated enemies in combat that should have overwhelmed you. And, most recently, you survived an ambush that was designed to capture the Academy's best candidate, turning your captor's trap into their defeat. The commander stepped closer, producing a small metal object from her uniform. For these reasons, and many others documented in your service record, I am awarding you the designation that will follow you throughout your military career. A battle name chosen to represent the essence of who you are and how you fight. Kira felt her heart pounding. Battle names were rare honors, given only to soldiers who had proven themselves exceptional in specific ways. Having one assigned before even officially entering active service was almost unheard of. From this day forward, Commander Thorne announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall, you will be known as Silent Storm. May your enemies learn to fear that name as much as they have already learned to fear your actions. The hall erupted in cheering. Recruits who had once doubted her now shouted her new name. Friends who had supported her from the beginning clapped until their hands hurt. Even instructors who rarely showed emotion joined the celebration. Kira stood at the center of it all, tears streaming down her face despite her best efforts to control them. Silent Storm. A name that honored both her limitation and her strength, that acknowledged her silence while celebrating the destruction she could bring to those who threatened the people she protected. After the ceremony, there was a reception where graduates could mingle with family members and distinguished guests. Kara had no family to invite, but she did not feel alone. Sarah stuck to her side, introducing her to everyone as the famous Silent Storm. James and the other commando graduates gathered around her like an honor guard. Sergeant Chen watched from a distance, his expression proud. A man in an elegant civilian suit approached the group, his bearing clearly military despite his lack of uniform. He had silver hair and eyes that seemed to see everything at once. Kira Voss, he said, extending his hand. Or should I say, Silent Storm. I am Colonel Marcus Reed, Commanding Officer of Special Operations Group 7. I wanted to meet you personally before you join my unit. Kira shook his hand, typing a greeting on her tablet. Colonel Reed smiled. No need for that with me. I have studied your file extensively. I know how you communicate, and I respect it. In fact, your unique communication style is one of the reasons I requested you. This surprised her. She had assumed that her silence would always be seen as a limitation, something to be worked around rather than valued. My unit operates in situations where traditional communication is dangerous, the colonel explained. Enemy listening posts, hostile territory, environments where a single spoken word could mean death. We need soldiers who can function at full effectiveness without making a sound. You have been training for this your entire life without knowing it. The realization struck Kara with the force of a physical blow. All those years of silence, all the struggles and humiliations, all the time she had wished she could speak like everyone else. It had all been preparing her for a role that specifically required her limitations. Colonel Reed continued, I will not pretend your assignments will be easy. We take the missions that other units cannot handle. The casualties rate is high. But, for someone of your abilities, the opportunities to make a real difference in this war are unmatched. Kira thought about her options. She could request a different assignment, something safer, something that would allow her to use her skills without constant danger. She could take an administrative position and help train others who faced challenges like hers. But those paths were not why she had come to the academy. She had come to fight. To protect. To honor the memory of everyone who had been lost to the Keth Empire's aggression. She typed, when do I start? Colonel Reed's smile widened. That is exactly what I hoped you would say. Report to Station Omega in 2 weeks. Your new life begins there. The final days at the academy passed quickly. Kira spent time with her friends, knowing that they would all soon scatter to different assignments across the galaxy. She had long conversations with Sarah about their hopes and fears for the future. She trained one final time with James, who was being assigned to a different special operations unit. We will see each other again, James said after their last sparring session. The war has a way of bringing people together in unexpected places. Kara typed, I hope so. You are one of the few people who understands me. James nodded seriously. I meant what I said before. You communicate more with silence than most people do with endless talking. That is a rare gift. Do not ever let anyone make you feel like it is a weakness. On her final night at the academy, Kara walked alone through the grounds. She visited the training field where she had first proven herself during the Winter Games. She stood outside the communication bunker where she had fought for her life during the Keth attack. She looked up at the stars that had seemed so unfamiliar on her first night, and which now felt like old friends. So much had changed since she arrived as a silent, angry girl with nothing but survival skills and determination. She had found friends, mentors, and a purpose. She had discovered that her silence was not a curse but a different way of existing in the world. She had earned a battle name that would follow her into history. The morning of her departure arrived with clear skies and a warm breeze. A transport ship waited on the landing pad, ready to take her to Station Omega and her new life. Sergeant Chen met her at the platform, his face showing the same gruff fondness she had come to expect from him. I have trained many soldiers, he said. But never one quite like you. Whatever happens out there, remember that you are more than your voice. You are more than your wounds. You are the sum of everyone who believed in you and everything you chose to become. Kira embraced him, something she had never done before. The old warrior seemed surprised but did not pull away. She typed one final message, you gave me the tools to survive. I will never forget. The transport lifted off, carrying Kara Voss toward the unknown. Below her, the academy grew smaller and smaller until it was just a tiny point of light against the orange clouds of Velar Prime. Above her, the stars waited with their promises of adventure, danger, and the chance to make a difference in a galaxy at war. The years that followed proved everything Colonel Reed had promised and more. Silent Storm became a legend in the special operations community, a name whispered by allies with respect and by enemies with fear. She completed missions that other soldiers could not even attempt, moving through hostile territory like a ghost, eliminating targets without anyone knowing she had ever been there. She saved colonies from Keth invasion by providing intelligence that allowed human forces to prepare unexpected defenses. She rescued prisoners from enemy facilities that were considered impossible to breach. She assassinated Keth commanders whose deaths threw entire enemy fleets into confusion. And, through it all, she never spoke a single word. Her battle name spread beyond the military. Civilians on distant colonies heard stories about the silent warrior who protected them from the shadows. Children played games where they pretended to be her, moving through their homes without making a sound, imagining themselves as heroes. Victor Crane spent the rest of his life in a military prison, his betrayal thoroughly documented and his family name destroyed. His story became a warning used in academy training about the dangers of arrogance and resentment. Sarah became a respected medical officer, saving lives across a dozen worlds. She and Kira stayed in touch, sending messages across the vast distances of space, their friendship surviving years and light years of separation. James Walker became a commando leader himself, and their paths crossed several times during joint operations. Each reunion reminded Kira of how far she had come from that silent, frightened girl who had arrived at the academy so many years ago. The war with the Keth Empire continued, as it had for generations. There were victories and defeats, advances and retreats. But humanity held the line, and among the many heroes who made that possible, one name appeared again and again in classified reports and grateful messages. Silent Storm. The girl who had no voice had become the warrior whose actions spoke louder than any words ever could. Her story was told in academies across the galaxy, inspiring others who faced their own limitations to believe that different did not mean lesser. And, somewhere in the darkness between stars, Kira Voss continued her work. Moving in silence. Striking without warning. Protecting those who could not protect themselves. She had come to the academy with nothing but survival instincts and a throat that would not produce words. She had left as a legend. And, every day, through every mission, she proved that true strength was not about the voice you used to give orders. It was about the actions you took when orders were not enough. It was about the courage to keep fighting when everyone expected you to fail. It was about the determination to turn your greatest weakness into your greatest strength. Silent Storm had no voice at the academy. But her battle name made history, and her story would be remembered long after the last echoes of war had faded into peace. The Keth Empire eventually fell, brought down by the combined efforts of humanity and its allies. Kira was there at the end, part of the team that captured the Keth Emperor himself, ending the war that had defined her entire life. After the victory celebrations, after the medals and the speeches and the parades, Kira returned to the academy on Velar Prime. She stood on the observation deck where she had first watched the Keth ships descend, so many years ago. The academy had grown and changed, but some things remained the same. New recruits still arrived with hopes and fears, some of them facing challenges that seemed impossible to overcome. And, among them, Kira noticed a young girl standing apart from the others, her hands moving in sign language as she tried to communicate with instructors who did not understand. Kira walked over to the girl and typed a message on her tablet, holding it up for her to see. "What is your name?" The girl signed back nervously, and Kira translated the movements in her mind. "My name is Maya. I cannot hear anything. They said I should not have been accepted, but somehow I passed all the tests." Kira typed another message, "Follow me. I want to show you something." She led Maya to the memorial wall, where the names of Academy heroes were inscribed in eternal honor. Near the top of the list, in gold letters, was her own battle name. "That is Silent Storm," Maya signed, her eyes wide. "Everyone knows about her. The greatest commando in history, who could not speak." Kira typed, "I am Silent Storm. And I want you to know that whatever challenges you face here, they do not define your limits. They define your opportunities." Maya stared at her, tears forming in her eyes. Then, she signed something that needed no translation, "Thank you." Kira smiled and began walking toward the main building, gesturing for Maya to follow. She had one more role to play in this academy, one final contribution to make. She was going to teach. Not with words, but with actions. Not through lectures, but through example. And, somewhere in the ranks of new recruits, the next Silent Storm was waiting to be discovered. The story of Kira Voss had come full circle. The girl who had no voice at the academy had made history, and now she would ensure that others like her would have the chance to do the same. Because true warriors are not measured by the sounds they make. They are measured by the silence they leave in their wake. And, in that silence, heroes are born.